coming together in this Sangha. And what we find is that Krishna reciprocates with that intention. He shows up for us. And so it's good to remember those intentions, so thank you for sharing. Today one of my favorite sections in Srimad Bhagavatam is the story of Priyavrata Maharaj. Anybody know? I was going to ask which canto Priyavrata Maharaj is, but it's on the screen. But before I gave that one away, that was my big question. Before I dive into that, I wanted to step a little bit further back and talk about just the glories of Srimad Bhagavatam a little bit. The purpose of Srimad Bhagavatam and the speciality of this book that we get to study together in the context of the broader canon of Vedic literature itself, right? We hear so much about Srimad Bhagavatam. We come together to study Srimad Bhagavatam, and the specific purpose of Srimad Bhagavatam, we know, is to establish the supremacy and purpose and to identify stories and examples and encouragements of bhakti. Specifically, this is the purpose of this specific shastra, which we take for granted, but is unique amidst the canon of Vedic literatures that we find throughout the Puranas, throughout the Upanishads, throughout other Vedic literatures. We find this in the three very powerful verses, specifically in the first canto of the second chapter, where Shonaka Rishi is beginning to, Shonaka Rishi is asking who? Sutta Goswami. Sutta Goswami is beginning to speak these very, very famous verses in Srimad Bhagavatam about what is the first question that Shonaka Rishi asks Sutta Goswami. In the first canto, first chapter, there's these 6 initial questions of Srimad Bhagavatam.
The best way to benefit human society at large?
What is the greatest benefit? What is the greatest good, right? For all people, right? And the answer that he gives is Savai Pum Sam Paral Dharmo Yato Bakira Loksajay Ahiktukiya Pratyata Yatmasu Prasidati. That the highest dharma, the highest occupation, the highest purpose of every living being is what? To render undeviated, unmotivated devotional service to Adhoksija, the supreme being, the supreme person. Right? That is our highest goal. That explicitly is the purpose of Srimad Bhagavatam, is to elucidate that specific point. And we again take it for granted because that's just what we're given, but it's a very radical statement. It's a very radical statement. And because it's such a radical statement, really all you need is love. Right? Comes right out and says it, all you need is love. The hippies were right, And so it's coming out and saying, and then there's all these questions that naturally come to mind. Like what is the Srimad Bhagavatam? The Srimad Bhagavatam is the commentary on the Vedanta Sutra. And what is the Vedanta Sutra? The Vedanta Sutra is Srila Vyasadeva, who compiled all the Vedas. And felt like, I don't know if it's been clear. Let me put it in the Vedanta Sutras. What does Vedanta mean? The end of the Vedas. So he put it to the end of the Vedas, and he said, let me go and write a commentary on that called Srimad Bhagavatam. So it's like, I'm giving the essence of all of it. And if you've read all, then you naturally get very confused. But what about all these other things that were stated in the Vedas? What about jnana? What about knowledge? What about renunciation, etc.? What about all these other things? And in the very next verse, we'll go ahead and pull up these verses so you can, because it's these verses that I want to lay as a foundation and for us to understand and appreciate any story that we read in Srimad Bhagavatam. So it's here, chapter 1, canto 1, chapter 2, verse 6. This is the verse that we just read, or just recited. Savai pung sam para dharmo yato bhaktir loksajay ahitukiya pratyata yamasu prasidati. The supreme dharma for all humanity is by that by which men can attain to loving devotional service unto the transcendent Lord. Such devotional service must be unmotivated and uninterrupted to completely satisfy the self. So here we have this exposition of bhakti. And the natural question that may come into any stage, what about jnana? What about renunciation? What about all these other things that we're told to do, right? All these other things that are important in spiritual life. In the very next verse, he answers this question. by saying Vasudeva Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojita Janayat Yashu Vairagam Jnana Chayat Ahitukam. By rendering devotional service, by performing Bhakti Yogi under the personality of God Vasudeva, Sri Krishna, one immediately acquires causeless knowledge and detachment from the world. Meaning that everything else that you thought was important, it comes along. Everything that you need comes along with bhakti. And everything you don't need, doesn't matter if you have it anyways. Right? Just perform your devotional service. And it's right there in the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam. And what we'll find is that it's there in every story of Srimad Bhagavatam. Because Srimad Bhagavatam is a story that completely breaks down all social norms and all social barriers and all common conceptions about what is right and what is wrong. We hear stories of children instructing their parents. Right? Where do we find children instructing their parents? Sorry?
Seventh canto.
Seventh canto?
Prahlad
Prahlad Maharaj instructing his father. We also get in the 10th canto, where the children are instructing Nanda Maharaj to worship Govardhan Hill. What are you doing? Ay, mamma, right? We hear stories of demons glorified as devotees. Where do we find that? Ritual story. Do you know that the stories of the Bhagavatam are not, the stories themselves are not unique to Srimad Bhagavatam. You find these stories written throughout the Vedas. The accounts of Prahlad Maharaj, the accounts of Dhruva Maharaj, the accounts of Indra and Vritrasur, they're told in other places of the Vedas. But do you know who's the hero in every other telling of the story of Indra and Vritrasur? Indra. Indra is known, he's glorified as the one who kills Vritrasur. When you read these stories in other Vedic accounts, Radhika Raman talks about this in his Classes Flourishing of Bhagavatam, which I'm sure he gave many times, but he specifically gave also at his concept of Silicon Valley. He talks about when you read these stories, Indra becomes the hero, as the one who killed Vritrasur, the demon Vritrasur. But when you read Srimad Bhagavatam, it turns the whole story and said, and who's the hero? Vritrasur. We hear stories where kings are more advanced than the Brahmanas. The Kshatriya administrative kings of state are more advanced than the Brahmanas. Where do we hear a story of that?
Where kings are more advanced than the Brahmanas?
Kings are more advanced than the Brahmanas. Prithu Maharaj was the king. Ambarish. Durvasa Muni, great sage, learned Brahmana, renunciate, couldn't control his ego. Had all of the jnana, had all of the vairagya right here, vairagya jnana chayat ahaitukam, but he missed the point. Ambarish Maharaj, in his opulence as a king, and what are those famous verses we have if you offered everything in devotional service to Krishna? Sorry?
Offer everything?
Offered everything.
Atmani
Vedana, he offered everything, right? His words, his movements, everything. There's this string of beautiful verses. So we have these complete role reverses in Srimad Bhagavatam where you have these sort of, what would normally seem like confusing circumstances. Bhagavatam is pushing and challenging the social norm. Gauranga, who was just recently coming out with a publication, he did some sort of dissertation or got a degree recently that is being published, and the title of it is The Legacy of Community Building in the Bhakti Tradition. And it's about Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and how he built community across borders. You have Haridas Thakur, who's coming from another religious background. You have the kings of King Prataparudra, that he's coming and he's initially gave a little bit of a hard time, but ultimately gave his mercy and is revered as a great devotee. From the kings all the way to the paupers in the street, Kolavencha Srihar. From the rich, Pundarik Vidyanidhi, to all classes of society, of men and women. So there's a story of a woman climbing on the shoulders of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to get his vision of Lord Jagannath. And bringing all these people together under one banner. Right? Haranam, 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 Eva Kevalam, Klonas, Eva, Klonas, Eva, Klonas, Eva, Kativa. Under the banner of chanting the holy names. And so what we find in the Srimad Bhagavatam is this specific point being highlighted, right? And it relates to us in our spiritual life, because what we find is that in our spiritual life, things don't always go smoothly. Anybody had that before? Yeah. Anybody just had a perfectly smooth ride in devotional life? Right? Some people are laughing, some people are getting like really uncomfortable. They're just like, right? Anybody have like things don't always go smoothly. And sometimes things don't go smoothly externally, right? There's external impediments, things that happen to us. And sometimes things don't go smoothly internally, right? In terms of our determination, or in terms of our enthusiasm, or in terms of my performance of devotional activities, right? Our sadhana are kind of like, it looks like a what is it called, an EKG? Is that what an EKG is? You know what I mean? Like you just ran a marathon. Anybody watch the Olympics and you see those marathon runners afterwards, just like, you just won a gold medal. How do you feel? They're just like tired. They're just like running, and their heart is just, like it feels like that sometimes. Our devotional life is like, woo! I went to Mangalarti, Bhagavata 5 days in a row. 5 devotees in a week. It goes up and it goes down, right? Internally, there's like a roller coaster, a storm of impediments that are coming and going, right? And what we find is the salient factor is not the Olympic gold medal performance of our bhakti through external activities, but it is the internal faith and determination to never let go of Krishna's lotus feet, no matter what comes our way, right? There may be days in our life that are hard, there may be seasons of life that are hard, there may be whole decades of our life that are hard. But what Krishna remembers that what is gained in our spiritual life is never taken away. Where does Krishna say that in the Bhagavad Gita?
I know the Sanskrit.
You do know the Sanskrit, or you don't know the
I
Sanskrit?
don't know.
No, but you know the reference.
Yes.
What's the reference?
For one who makes progress on this path, they can avoid the greatest of fear. That's different. But they can, they lose, there's no loss or diminution.
No loss or diminution. Somebody want to help him out? Where in Bhagavad Gita? Shabbat?
I don't know the Sanskrit.
You know where it is?
No.
Bhagavati?
I know the English, but I don't know any of those.
Yeah.
Seventh chapter.
I can just make anything up here. Bhagavad Gita 2:40. I feel like I'm in a game of spiritual Jeopardy. I think we had a spiritual Jeopardy. Wouldn't it be cool?
That'd be a really good idea.
That'd be a really good idea. We should just.
Chapter 2, verse 40.
That's what I said.
But I cheated. I Googled it.
Oh, you Googled it
Yes.
after I said it.
Yeah.
You Googled Bhagavad Gita 2:40.
Yeah. Well, I Googled no loss or diminution.
No loss of vision. That's the power of I love getting classes with my computer, because I also don't remember things sometimes, and I only remember this from my last class. In this endeavor, there's no loss or diminution, and a little advancement on this path is the second one for the most dangerous type of fear. We should hold on to this verse like a steady pole in a storm. I was looking for a more poetic word than a pole, but like something like a steady post in a storm, right? That this is our saving grace. That nothing we do in devotional life is ever lost, right? And our job as devotees, for ourselves and for each other, is to remind people of this. To not criticize each other because of our seeming faults, as Prabhupada would say, like spots on a wound, right? But to remind people that what you have done is amazing. The fact that you're here is amazing. The fact that you've chanted Krishna's names once is amazing. The fact that you've opened up and come in contact with Srimad Bhagavatam, offered some service, whether it's 1 day of service, 1 decade of service, 1 lifetime of service, there is an eternal benefit. And no matter how wavy the road gets, no matter how tumultuous the storms become, there is something that never is lost in our life, and it can be regained in a moment. Ravindra Sriprabhu so beautifully would talk about this. There was an essay that he wrote, and there was a lecture series he gave about chanting. and I forget what the exact was, but he says that you can have focused chanting in a moment. Like, you can be serious about your spiritual life in a moment. Like, getting the getting from going off track to on track can be done like that, right? In a moment. And he may lose it again, but continuously. So this is the salient point we read in Srimad Bhagavatam. None of the stories are smooth. None of the stories are smooth. Dhruva Maharaj, not smooth. Prahlad Maharaj, not smooth. Gajendra, not smooth. Ajamil, very unsmooth. Right? Again and again and again and again and again. And I just wanted to read this very next verse just here in Srimad Bhagavatam before we move. And then we'll use this as some context and inspiration to get into the story of Maharaj Priyavrata. So this next verse is in Srimad Bhagavatam. Look at verse 2:6. The glory of Srimad Bhagavatam, Savai Pungsang Paragdamo Yato Bhaktir Hokshije, Haitukiya Pratita Yatma Superseded. The highest dharma is loving devotional service. That is like a thesis statement for the Bhagavatam. And you will not lose anything else by giving yourself to bhakti. You don't need all of these other things. What was it? Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur was encouraging people to take to devotional service. And what did Srila Prabhupada say initially?
Once we get our independence.
Once India gets its independence from the British, Bhakti Siddhanta said, "You're right." Then he started a political campaign and ran for prime minister. What did he say?
He said it doesn't matter that there will always be some political or external change in the world, but now is the time. Now is the time to take to Krishna consciousness and spread Krishna consciousness.
So there'll always be some turmoil. Now is the time. And there's one other really important piece of that. And you can add to that.
That this is the ultimate peace formula.
Ultimate peace formula, and
The only lacking in the world is a lack of Krishna consciousness.
the only lacking of the world is Krishna consciousness. It's very close.
Did we get independence?
That Krishna consciousness doesn't depend on any material factor.
Yeah. And also it's eternal, whereas these things are temporary.
It's eternal, these things are temporary, yes. And if you think that the material circumstance needs to change in order for me to launch my bhakti practice or move, then we're in some sort of illusion. That means that bhakti is some inferior process that needs the external circumstances to be in a certain way. Bhakti is not dependent on any external circumstances. Right? I was just in DC and I was talking with a devotee who had spent time in prison. And he was talking about the Gaur Pradeep feast he served in prison and the festival they did. And somebody remembered this, that book. I never read it, Salted Bread. Have you read that book? I heard it's not possible to read without coming to tears. You know? And Salted Bread. Why is it called Salted Bread? Can we get a microphone over here? I saw some head nods.
They used to make
Yeah,
small
get
beads
another
out of
microphone.
They used to make small beads while they were in prison. They used to make beads out of bread that was offered for them to eat, so that they could chant on them.
Yeah, where was it? It was in
Soviet Union. I was in Russia, right?
Russia. Yeah. Devotees were sent to prison just for being devotees, and they used to make japamala. They would be given bread to eat. All they would give to eat, and they would take that bread and they would take the dough and roll it up into little balls and dry it, and then they would make beads out of it, and then they would string it, and that would be the japamala. Right? The japamala. Right? And so this sense of like our devotional life not being dependent on any material circumstances. And sometimes Krishna puts us in these very difficult circumstances so that we have an opportunity to recognize that I have nowhere else to turn but Krishna. Even in the highest realm of devotional service, Krishna is doing that, right? To the gopis of Vrindavan, making himself unavailable. Yeah, Lakshmi.
I just wanted to ask if Srila Prabhupada says anywhere specifically what the most dangerous type of fear is.
What the most dangerous type of fear? Let's look at his purport. Usually, I've always understood it to be death. Let's go ahead and read this purport. Would you like to read this purport for us?
That's okay.
She's like, no, I just want you to give me the answer. One of them wants to read it, I call his hand go first.
I've been speaking about Krishna Chaitanya.
Yes, thank you, appreciate it.
I honestly, even with my glasses, I can't really see this.
No worries.
The whole thing, yes, Prabhu?
Until we get to the answer, if we find it.
Okay. Activity in Krishna consciousness, or acting for the benefits of Krishna without expectation of sense gratification, is the highest transcendental quality of work. Even a small beginning of such activity finds no impediment, nor can that small beginning be lost at any stage. Any work begun on the material plane has to be completed. Otherwise, the whole attempt becomes a failure. But any work begun in Krishna consciousness has a permanent effect, even though not finished. The performer of such work is therefore not at a loss, even if his work in Krishna consciousness is incomplete. 1% done in Krishna consciousness bears permanent results, so that the next beginning is from the point of 2%, whereas in material activity, without 100% success, there is no profit. Ajamil performed his duty in some percentage of Krishna consciousness, but the result he enjoyed at the end was 100% by the grace of the Lord. There is a nice verse in this connection in Srimad Bhagavatam 1.5.17. Tyaktva swadharmam charanam bhujam harer bhajan apakvo ta pate tato yadi yatra kva vabhadram abhud amusyakim kovarta apto bhajatam swadharmataha. If someone gives up his occupational duties and works in Krishna consciousness and then falls down on account of not completing his work, what loss is there on his part? And what can one gain if one performs his material activities perfectly? Or, as the Christians say, what profiteth a man if he gain the whole world, yet suffer the loss of his eternal soul? Material activities and their results end with the body. But work in Krishna consciousness carries a person again to Krishna consciousness, even after the loss of the body. At least one is sure to have a chance in the next life of being born again as a human being, either in the family of a great cultured Brahmana or in a rich aristocratic family that will give one a further chance for elevation. That is the unique quality of work done in Krishna consciousness.
Thank you so much. Christian, you have a great voice.
Thank you.
I
I actually, I do audiobook narrations as well.
Okay, whatever you got, sign me up for it. So Prabhupada doesn't really give a very direct answer, but he does reference death near the end, a little bit of a loss. My sense is always, what are the two greatest fears that they say in life? Public speaking and death, right? Rather than speak in front of other people, I'd rather die, right? Yeah, no, get your hand up.
My understanding is of even more than death, it's taking rebirth in lower species. So Prabhupada is saying at the end here, taking birth, at least as a human being, that's the most important thing. So the greatest fear is something subhuman where you have no chance.
Being lost in the material field. Yeah. What are you going to say something?
No, I also read that.
Okay, beautiful. Okay, got it. Check. Thank you for that. Okay, so I just wanted to read this next verse here of Bhagavatam, and then we'll look at Priyavrat Maharaj. So this is the 1-8. Occupational activities a man performs according to his own position are only so much useless labor if they do not provoke attraction for the message of the personality of Godhead. Dharma swanushtita pungsam vishvakshena katha shuya not padhaya yatiram shrama eva ikevalam. Useless, right? Pretty heavy, harsh, Bhagavatam's going for it, right? It's kind of it's soft, it's poetic, but it's really strong statements, right? And it's this is the beginning verses of Srimad Bhagavatam, where we have this understanding. Let be clear what's important and what's not. And so as the Srimad Bhagavatam is telling all of these stories, all of these social norms, all of these normal narratives are turned all up on their head, and we realize what's important and what isn't. And this is where we begin the story of Maharaj Priyavrata in the Srimad Bhagavatam, in the 5th canto. It's this whole confusion about what's important, about what's not, about what it means to be a devotee and what it means to not be a devotee, what it means to be immersed in material energy. Krishna mentions, right, in the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, that I will explain this knowledge to you for novel and numinous, nothing further will be left for you to know. He explains the 8 elements: earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego. And he says that is all my bina prakriti, my separated material energy. But separate from that is my eternal spiritual energy, which you are a part of. But what is this? What is the higher spiritual energy doing? Exploiting the resources of this lower inferior material nature. Right? And so we are known as Tatastha Shakti. Tatastha means situated on the beach. Anybody going to the beach after Bhagavad Sravana today? Or maybe. You're already on a beach. Why are we called the Tatastha Shakti? Because the beach, is it water or is it land? It depends on the tide. Has the capacity to be land, has the capacity to be water, depending upon what it's covered by or what influence it's under. So we can be under the influence of material energy or spiritual energy. Everything in our devotional life is simply to put us in contact with spiritual energy. What makes something spiritual? Some things is very clear. Deities, the holy name, japa, right? And so, but some things, probably we'll give the example of this microphone, right? We can use this for speaking nonsense, we can use it for speaking Srimad Bhagavatam. Example of a knife, you can be used to harm somebody, or it can be used to save somebody's life. So sometimes what makes something, and then Krishna in that very same 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Daivi Hiya Shaguna Mayi Mama Maya Dharaktya. This divine energy of mine, Yogi Charu? Divinely created. What does he mean when he's saying Daivi Shakti? His divine transcendental energy. He's talking about the material world. But he's saying this material world is divine because it's Krishna's energy. Right? And so that's the vision of a Mahabhagavata. One of the favorite things you can do in your spiritual life is just go watch videos or read transcripts of Srila Prabhupada on his morning walks. That's when you really, in many ways, saw Prabhupada's Krishna consciousness just flourish, just like in full display. Because he would just see things and just be Krishna conscious, right? He would see, one story is that he would see a swarm of mosquitoes, right? What do you heard the story?
No, I was gonna say the sunset.
The sunset. What do you say about the sunset?
He said if you like.
He said if you like the art, you should meet the artist.
If you like the art, you should meet the artist. He would see a swarm of mosquitoes. You know what he said? He said so much flight going on without any flight control. And they never crash. You say Krishna's so intelligent. Right? And so he would look out and he would see all these things and would just notice, right? And you see Krishna kind of just going out in the world and seeing Krishna, right? Out in the world. Therefore he would say, on the light of the sun and the moon, and the taste of water, and the original fragrance of the earth, and the prowess of all powerful people. So it would give us a vision of how to go out and see the world in a Krishna conscious way. And in that way, you're living in the spiritual reality. Bhaktivinoda Thakur song, what's that beautiful song? He would walk into his home and it would be like Vaikuntha. Shuddha Bhakta. Shuddha Bhakta Charana Renu. And he would say, I'm walking to my home and it's like Vaikuntha. And so this is the point. And everything else, even if it all looks wonky, right? And we know some of those devotees, right? Everything about their life looks a little wonky, but somehow they're in it. They're in the spiritual energy. Right? And sometimes our lives can look completely pucka and perfect, but it's for the wrong reasons. And it just simply, I was in DC last weekend doing some programs at Bhakti Yoga DC, Gopi Manjari. So it was really, really wonderful work out there. And we were talking about this point, and one of the guests, just comes to the yoga class, was in the discussion, and they were talking about how you can do sometimes the right things for the wrong reasons. And she was like, yeah, I heard about this. Like pranayama, like you can do too much pranayama because it can inflate your ego. And I was like, I thought she was gonna say like it can like hurt your lungs or something like that. She's like, no, may inflate ego, right? You know what I mean? Imagine if there was a warning on that in certain things, like may cause ego inflation, may cause stomach irritation, heartburn, and ego inflation, if you approach things for the wrong reasons. And so Srimad Bhagavatam is continuously hitting us over the head about not doing the right things for the wrong reasons. And even if something seems like a wrong thing for the right reason, can actually be the greatest mystery of unlocking devotional service. Read the story of Richard Stewart, right? So the 5th canto, Maharaj Bhagavata. I all encourage you to go, please read just the first chapter of the 5th canto, just the first 23, 24 verses. We won't get through all of them today because I did too much talking before that. So, but just go and read the first 23, 24 verses of the story of Maharaj Priyavrata. Who is the father of Maharaj Priyavrata? Rishabdev is actually a descendant of I think either the grandson or the great grandson of Maharaj Priyavrata. So Brahma created the entire universe, right? And he tried to populate the universe through his own progeny. He asked the 4 Kumars to please progenate the universe. And what did they say? No way, man, I'm not doing that, right? Which is so powerful, right? I would hear the stories, like I was sometimes we have to also honor our own nature in spiritual life, even sometimes when we get an instruction from the spiritual master. There's a need to recognize. Radha Swami told me this recently. He said that sometimes you want to be surrendered in spiritual life, and you think that means doing the needful or doing whatever's is there, right? He said there's truth to that. But sometimes the greatest surrender is understanding what we're good at in spiritual life, or what gifts Krishna has given to us, and offering those in service. And so right from the beginning of Bhagavata, and the 4 Kumars, they're never like, oh, they disobeyed their father. Like, they're glorified as great devotees and renunciates. So they said no. And so, but the problem was, like, Brahma was so enlightened, he kept just producing all these in Narada Muni, It's like nobody wanted to have children. It wasn't until Swayambhuva Manu took up the service. Swayambhuva Manu, the original Manu of the universe, and his wife Shatarupa. They had 5 children. Devahuti, Akuti, Prasuti, Priyavrata, and Uttanapad. 3 daughters, Akuti, Devahuti, and Prasuti, and 2 sons, Priyavrata and Maharaj Uttanapad. And basically, most of the entirety of the 3rd, 4th, and 5th canto are the stories of those descendants. You have Devahuti, who married Kardama Muni, and their son was Kapila Dev. And you have the whole massive portion of the 3rd canto is the story of Kapila Dev. You have Akuti, who didn't have so many descendants. You get a little bit of mention of her. You have Prasuti. Who is Prasuti's daughter? Sati. You hear the whole story of Sati and Daksha and Shiva in the 4th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. And you have Uttanapad. Who is Uttanapad's son? Dhruva. The whole 4th canto, Dhruva Maharaj, Preacher Maharaj, King Prajina Pasha, all those descendants of Uttanapad. And Uttanapad was actually the younger brother of Maharaj Priyavrata. But Uttanapad took the kingdom first because Priyavrata, similar to the 4 Kumars, was like, nah, I'm not doing that. You just get that inclination. He just went to the forest. He became a renunciate. He became a sadhu. He just did the things all his mama told him not to do, and just spent too much time hanging out with the brahmacharis, and just ended up living in the forest and was a renunciate. And he said, you, my younger brother, you rule. And Uttanapad like, sure, I'll do it. But then the descendants of Maharaj Uttanapad eventually ran out. And they're like, we need a royal bloodline. Somebody text Priyavrata Maharaj, tell him to come out of retirement. Right? So, his father sent him a text. It's like, you never call me anymore. Like, your mom's really worried. Like, I send you orange sweaters for Christmas every year, but you never say thank you, It's like, they went to him, and Maharaj Priyavrata was like, no, I don't want to. Like, Narada Muni's my guru, and he instructed me. And Brahma himself had to come and say, you're not getting it. You didn't read Srimad Bhagavatam. Like, you can live in this world and be fully immersed. You will not lose. Because Priyavrata Maharaj was worried. If I get all entangled, right? If I get all mixed up in all of that, I'm gonna forget Krishna. Bhaktivinoda Thakur so beautifully praised. He was like that. He talks about in the 3rd canto. You hear the stories of the living entity in the womb, right? Like forgetting you. Bhuliya Tumari. He talks about forgetting you. Right? I forgot you. He said I never would forget, but I forgot. Right? I forgot. How forgiving and sweet and wonderful is Krishna? Like, we just keep like, if any friend treated us the way we treat Christians, like, would they hang around? You know what I mean? You only call when you need something, constantly forgetting. When things go well, you stop being in touch, right? And it's just like lifetime after life, it's just like, Krishna would just move on. Like, but he comes as Ranamulidar to be with us. Not because like he's hungry and like needs us necessarily. Like he's got a lot going on in the spiritual world, like Radharani and Nanda Maharaj and Yashoda Maharaj and his friends, right? He's not sitting there being served by the residents of Vrindavan just thinking like, this is boring. I'm gonna go down to New York City, catch a Broadway show. He's coming here because he's actually eager for our love. He's here for us. Right? He's just like, no matter what, like I'm always here. And so, Maharaj Priyavrat was worried. And so we get this is the story of the first chapter of the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, is this, first of all, it's this questioning of Parikshit Maharaj in the story, in the narration. So let's go ahead and read, I want to read this part. Yeah, let's go ahead and just read a little bit of this. Let's go ahead and read just the first paragraph. There we go. Just the first paragraph and then the first line of the second paragraph.
The activities of Maharaj Priyavata. This chapter describes how King Priyavata enjoyed royal opulence and majesty, and then returned to full knowledge. King Priyavata was detached from worldly opulence, and then he became attached to his kingdom. But finally, he again became detached from material enjoyment, and thus achieved liberation. When King Parikshit heard about this, he was struck with wonder. But he was somewhat bewildered as to how a devotee with no attachment for material enjoyment could later become attached to it. This, in astonishment, he questions Sukadeva Goswami.
Pause right there. So that's the confusion. So the Bhagavatam is constantly beginning with these kinds of questions, right? It's like constantly like, how is it that so-and-so became liberated? How is it that Vritrasura was such a powerful devotee? How is it that Shishupal received such liberation when he was so envious of Krishna? How is it that this it's like this constant, again, this turning on the head the social norms and narratives. Like, how is it that this person received such mercy, right? And it's like, you didn't read the first three, you don't remember the first three verses, do you? Right? Where I told you that like this speciality of devotional service, right? So then, just to read that first line there, Manohar, of that second paragraph.
In response to the king's inquiries, Shukadeva Goswami said that devotional service, being transcendental, cannot be deviated by any material influences.
There you go. It's just like again and again, like just pointing that very clearly for us, right? Okay, so let's read some of these verses. There was one purport that I want to look at, but we can just read some of the verses. And text 1, King Parikshit inquired from Shukadeva Goswami. O great sage, why did King Priyavrata, who was a great self-realized devotee of the Lord, remain in household life, which is the root cause of the bondage of karma, fruitive activities, and which defeats the mission of human life, right? Again, misconception demystified. This like polarization of like good and bad, right? Just gets completely annihilated in Krishna consciousness. We look at Prabhupada will like later reference in his purports the 12 Mahajans, right? The 12 Mahajans. And interestingly, in this scene, so many of them are present because Brahma comes, he's a Mahajan. His son Narada Muni is there, who's a Mahajan. Swayambhuva Manu is a Mahajan. And it mentions that Shiva himself, because all the demigods and all of the were present also. Shiva was there as also Mahajan. Like a large gathering of Mahajans are in this assembly when Brahma begins to start to speak, right? And when you look at the Mahajans, some of them are renunciates. Shukadeva Goswami, right? You hear some of them are complete renunciates. And then you look at them, many of them are householders. Many of them are householders. I don't know all the Mahajans memorized by heart, but I know some of them are, some of them aren't. You look at the story of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his greatest followers. You get a collection of renunciates and householders. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was a householder. Ramananda Roy. Advaitacharya himself. And then you also have renunciates. Raghunath Das Goswami. Govinda. You get this collection, this mix of of none of those things being qualifying factors of our bhakti. But you have this conception, right? Material life being something that we get immersed in, quote unquote, householder life, because it's a consciousness that probably would juxtapose those consciousnesses. Devotees are certainly liberated persons, therefore, O greatest of the Brahmins, they cannot possibly absorb in family affairs. Elevated Mahatmas who have taken shelter of lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are fully satiated by the shade of lotus feet. Their consciousness cannot possibly become attached to family members. The king continued, O great Brahmin, this is my great doubt. How is it possible for a king like King Priyavrata, who was so attached to wife, children, and home, to achieve the topmost infallible perfection in Krishna consciousness? Again, he's like setting up this question, right? Of misunderstanding what it means to be a devotee. Right? So, text 5. Sri Shukadeva Goswami said, what you have said is correct. The glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is praised in eloquent, transcendental verses by such exalted personalities as Brahma, are very pleasing to great devotees and liberated persons. One who is attached to the nectarian honey of the Lord's lotus feet, and whose mind is always absorbed in his glories, may sometimes be checked by some impediment, but he still never gives up the exalted position he has acquired. I want to read just a few lines from this purport. The rest of the verses, up to like verse 23, 24, is when Brahma comes and he actually convinces Priyavrata Maharaj, who's in renunciation, who's in the forest, who's renounced everything, to come back into his service of ruling the kingdom once needed, and assuring him that like you will not lose your knowledge, you will not lose your devotional status. There's a service you have to perform, and sometimes, Brahma doesn't say it exactly this way, but sometimes we have to do strange things in the service of devotional service, right? Ranaswamy said that when he found out that The Journey Home was a New York Times bestseller. It was in Los Angeles, I believe, and somebody told him, he's like, wow, your book became a New York bestseller. And he said, sometimes we do strange things in the service of Srila Prabhupada. Right? Sometimes we do strange things in the service of Krishna, right? And so we are being called sometimes to do what may normally not seem. And Srila Prabhupada got criticism constantly from his God brothers, from other people, about what he was doing to bring Krishna consciousness to us, right? And our gurus, right? And our gurus' gurus for some of us, right? And so the Prabhupada understood this point. Okay. First back purport. It's a little long, we're not going to be able to get through the whole thing, but I wanted to read one particular point. Okay. Somebody want to read this first paragraph of the purport? I know we're short on time, but we'll just start here. We'll just read this paragraph and then we'll stop. I have the mic.
Sri Shukadeva Goswami accepted both the king's propositions that a person who is advanced in Krishna consciousness cannot embrace materialistic life again, and that one who has embraced materialistic life cannot take up Krishna consciousness at any stage of his existence. Although, accepting both these statements, Shukadeva Goswami qualified them by saying that a person who has once absorbed his mind in the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead may sometimes be influenced by impediments, but he still does not give up his exalted devotional position.
Thank you. So this probably would go on the purport to say that sometimes there are impediments that we cause through our offenses or mishaps, and sometimes there are impediments that Krishna himself becomes an impediment. He chooses to put us in a situation where there's a seeming impediment in order for us to advance in our devotional service by increasing our dependency on him. And so Shukadeva Goswami is accepting these statements from Parishar Maharaj, but again he's qualifying with this harmonizing factor that one's devotional service is never lost. Api chetsu virachato, this is the verse you were quoting earlier. In the 9th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, that even if one commits dhuracha, the most abominable activities, they're considered saintly. Why? Samyak visito hisa, because they're situated in their determination. So Krishna's getting that determination. And sometimes, in case you didn't get it by now, Devotional service will humble us. Our devotional service will humble us. Prabhupada was once said that you've given us so many rules and regulations, like it's so much. And Prabhupada said, I've given you only a fraction. If you knew everything, you would fail. Prabhupada gave us 16 rounds because first he started with 64, then he went to 32, there's like 16 final offer. You know? Right? And Prabhupada initiated people knowing that they weren't all going to be. Prabhupada wasn't checking each person. Prabhupada, the people you joined the temple, 2 weeks later you were on the initiation list. Right? You know? Now we have said you got to be chanting 16 rounds for like 2 years, you got to have your Bhakti Shastri, you got to be, you know, all of these. Prabhupada was like, they just put out their cigarette in the street, walked to the temple, and like sat down in front of the fire, right? Got their beads, you know. You are Gajendra Das, Harimo. You know, what did he say? What Gajendra, Gajaja, what? You know. And so there's that story of Hamsa Dutta Prabhu got initiated, and he's like, where's my name from? What does my name mean? You know, where can I find it? It's like, it's in the Bhagavatam. You gotta go find it in the Bhagavatam. Half the Bhagavatam wasn't even translated yet, right? We're getting names, you didn't know what they meant, you know? So your name is Upendra Das. What's an Upendra? You know? So now we have all these sweet names. Your name is Gopi Leela Vrindavan Deshwari Devi Dasi. Haribol! You know? Your name is Gadagraja. What's a Gadagraja? You probably had all these names from the Bhagavatam who had never heard of before, right? So Prabhupada understood this principle, right? So devotional life will humble us. Right? And we have an opportunity, we have a choice. Every day when we're humbled in our service, when we fall short, when we don't meet the mark, when we feel like we are externally or internally not where we want to be, to give up our devotional service or to give up our false ego. To give up the devotional service and say, I'm not qualified, it's too hard, I can't do it. Or to give up the false ego that says, I'm such a great devotee, I'm going to do this so perfectly. All that perfectionistic mindset that we bring into our devotional service, Krishna's going to grind it out of us. So that when you get there, it's not like, I did it, right? I made it, I filled out my spiritual report card, and now I'm a good devotee. It's like, no, you are a product of grace, sister. You are a product of grace, my friend. And it humbles us. It humbles us so deeply. That's how you find in the most deepest prayers of our acharyas, the most exalted devotees, how is it that they're so hard on themselves? Like they got some psychological issue? Our acharyas need to go to therapy, right? They're so down. So no, they just simply understood that as elevated as I am, I'm a product of grace. And because of that grace, Krishna's able to elevate them. So he trusts them so much, he elevates them. Radha Swami said this once, that when we're humble, Krishna uses us to do amazing things. And as Krishna uses us to do amazing things, it just humbles us even more. Like, oh my God, Krishna's using me to do this, I can't believe it. And then when we get more humble, Krishna uses us to do more things. And on and on and on. Right? And so, devotional service will humble us. And the opportunity we have is to embrace that and allow it to let go of everything that's keeping me in the way of Krishna. And therefore, this is the last point. We should be very careful how we view and judge other devotees. Somebody may be in a point of struggle, and that's just Krishna doing some work. Our job is to support them. And yes, there are discernments we need to make. Rupa Goswami makes this very clear also in the Upadeshamrita, right? He talks about different levels of devotees that we should all respect within our mind. Some we may take their intimate association personally. Some we may keep a little bit of distance and respect from afar. But we should hold respect for everybody, for our own sake and for theirs. Recognizing that everybody is a pure spirit soul, making their way towards Krishna. And they've offered some service, and Krishna is just grinding out whatever may need to be grinded out. And they may be in some moment of impediment. It doesn't disqualify them from Krishna's love and Krishna's mercy. We should be very careful how we judge other people and devotees, and always constantly offer them love. Hare Krishna, Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, Doyle. Thank you so much, devotees. We will have Arti and Kirtan for their lordships now. So we'll just move the cushions and the chairs to the side, and please come forward for Arti. And one other small announcement. Trying to see where he's at, but Vinay, who is a wonderful volunteer for this program, if you're interested in helping with prasadam transfer or serve out today, you can see him. He will be here soon. Hare Krishna.
Shivana Gaurachandra ki jai. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine.
Namaste
Shishimara Divine Grace. Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Jai Vishnupa Paramahamsa Paravachakacharya Stotra Stotra Shishimara Divine Grace. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Thakur Prabhupada ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki jai. Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shamakun Radhakun Giri Govardhan ki jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Mayapur Navadvip Dham ki jai. Shri Jagannath Puri Dham ki jai. Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Devi ki jai. Ganga Mai ki jai. Jamuna Mai ki jai. Tulsi Devi ki jai. Bhakti Devi ki jai. Kaliuga Dharma Harinam Sankirtan Yajna ki jai. The Divine Loving Lordship Shri Shri Radha Mulidara ki jai. Prem Purushottam Shri Gaura Chandra ki jai. Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Nitai Gaura Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the divine lotus feet of Sri Shri Guru and Sri Gauranga.
Namaste, such a really, really deep and helpful class. It helped me a lot on many levels. So please stay for lunch. We have lunch prashadam in the back for everyone. And this program happens every single Sunday at the same time. Please come back again and again. And festival season is very soon approaching with Jula and Yatra and Balaram Jayanti and Janmashtami and Srila Prabhupada's appearance day. Yes, so if I was to give you like all the times and the details right now, you wouldn't even remember. So what I highly recommend is two things. Going to our website and clicking on Temple. And the Temple page has all of the upcoming festivals, and also join our newsletter. If you scroll down to the bottom of the website, you can click join our newsletter, and then there's the regular newsletter and the Temple newsletter. So make sure you join both. And the Temple newsletter is where these programs will be. So thank you all so much. And one last announcement, we have a really special, amazing volunteer team running this program. If anybody would like to help serving prasadam or cleaning up afterwards, you can see Parikshit, who will be serving prasadam. Thank you all so much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.